Redemption is a tricky bit of business in anime. When done right, it can elevate a baddie to an all-timer of a character. I mean, just look at Vegeta and Meruem. They're legends in this business for a reason. When things go kaput, we end up with an Orochimaru situation on our hands, and trust us, no other character's fall from grace has ever pissed us off as much as that one did. Still, at least they managed to redeem themselves. If there's one Berserk character for whom redemption has always felt impossible, it's Nina. From the moment she was introduced in the Conviction arc to the moment she disappeared from Berserk, Nina only cared about one person, and that was herself. She went to extreme lengths to protect herself and made choices that can only be called abhorrent in retrospect. But Berserk is a story that seeks to redeem the soul of a man who nearly violated the woman he swore to love and protect. Is it possible that the most hated character in Berserk might redeem herself as well? That's exactly what we're here to find out, so without further ado, this is our Nina return theory. Explained. Who is Nina and why is she so hated? Nina was one of 5 prostitutes who were introduced as Casca's makeshift caretakers during the Conviction arc, and from the beginning, there's something off about her. Not the fact that she's got an STD raging through her body, but the fact that she's in a near constant state of fear and paranoia. Nina's first actions in the series include her throwing rocks at an accused heretic because a crowd egged her on, and when she takes Casca to the base of the Tower of Conviction to collect water, she worries that her disease will make her mindless like her new companion. Nina wants nothing more than to live, but she's constantly afraid for her life because, well, she's a coward. She doesn't have the strength to face her fears and problems head on, preferring to get lost in the mire of mistrust and misgivings, and that's why many in the Berserk community hate her. In many ways, she's the worst kind of human there can be. Ignorant, selfless, thankless, and foolhardy. But we can just as easily say that she's the most human of all the characters there are in Berserk because something about her reaction to everything that's happening near St. Albion feels appropriate. She's terrified of the Tower of Conviction, even though God dwells within, which turns out to be justified because, in God's name, Father Mozgus carries out the worst kind of torture inside the tower. Nina is what you or I would be like in the Berserkverse if we were dropped into it with no context or help, probably minus the STDs, but in order to cope with her reality, she ends up joining a sex cult where initiates breathe in hallucinogens, copulate with as many members as possible, perform a short ritual with a figurehead, and then eat human flesh to confirm their loyalty. Now, we don't know how many of you guys would do such a thing, but Nina did it, and she knew that her STD could have easily spread through her people. She also used her disease to repel one of her old customers, Joachim, who had fallen in love with her. Nina often gave him freebies, but she never expressed her attachment to him because she felt that wasn't appropriate for a prostitute. When Joachim showed up to confess while Nina was walking with Casca, she refused service to him, though he didn't ask for it, and then pointedly asked him if he wanted her even after knowing she was ill. Nina told him to meet her later that night and prove his love for her, and initially it was going well. Joachim committed to doing whatever it took to prove he loved Nina, including kissing another man's penis under the influence of drugs. But where he drew the line was cannibalism, and Nina immediately betrayed him and tried to have her cultist buddies kill him. When he fell over the side of a cliff, she made it seem like she was okay, but Luca arrived to discipline her and revealed that she really wasn't. She spanked Nina into admitting she was upset Joachim had abandoned her and charged her with not worrying her like that ever again. But Luca wasn't aware of how acute Nina's admiration and hatred for her was. Nina looked up to Luca as a caretaker and a friend, but at the same time, she couldn't digest the fact that she acted so superior despite being a sex worker like her. She resented Luca for being a better person than she and would often act out because of it. At one point, she had Luca's life in her hands, and though she was crying for her protection before, in that moment, Nina was ready to let her fall just to feel superior for once in her life. She's all over the place from an emotional perspective, and that makes her do some of the worst things imaginable. When Luca goes out to save one of her workers from Inquisitors, Nina gets spooked and decides to take Casca on the run with her. This is after she told Luca to dump the girl as they'd done everything they could for her. Nina had even suggested handing Casca over to the cult because she was clearly a witch and they couldn't hide her forever, but when she came across her cult buddies with her, she was taken prisoner and nearly sacrificed for stealing their witch. Nina's presence during the entire Conviction arc was emblematic of the panic and fear that one feels when Armageddon approaches. People would be desperate to find a way to live life fully as best as they could when they knew they've got a death sentence hanging over them, and Nina's a prime example of this. She managed to survive the entire incarnation ceremony by hiding out in a barrel, and though she was terrified, she knew she wanted to live. Over time, all of Nina's fear and inaction boiled down to her realizing what she needed to do to escape her situation, which, ironically enough, was something she was afraid of doing all throughout the conviction arc. When was the last time we saw Nina? Nina's character arc concluded with her leaving Luca and the girls and going off into the sunset with Joachim, intent on tackling life with someone just as weak as her. Shocking for someone that tried to kill him just because he was spooked by a bunch of heretics, we know, but Nina pretty much had no other choice in her own mind. The reason we hate Nina is because of how quickly she succumbs to her human flaws. She feels rejected and oppressed by God as a prostitute, so she throws herself into the arms of cultists who have no qualms about violating her if that's what it took for them to feel pleasure. She wanted to be a protector for Casca because she was truly defenseless given her mental state, but she also needed to be protected, considering her own physical condition. Yet she couldn't stand how high and mighty her protector acted each time she claimed her independence, and in the end, all Nina was left with was resentment. For the cultists, for Joachim, for Luca, for life itself. Above all, Nina resented herself for being the weakling that she was. But the incarnation ceremony changed her on a fundamental level. It was while she was getting rattled around by the flowing blobs of living blood that she realized she wanted to live as desperately as a parched man needed water, so she rode the whole thing out, and the next morning she decided that she was going to trust Luca after all. She had betrayed Luca so many times. She had broken her trust by joining the cult, she broke it again when she let her fall to her near death, and yet every time Luca came back to her to put her straight and keep her safe. Nina realized that Luca's strength was in her ability to think of others, even when she herself was in great danger, and for once, she wanted to let herself enjoy that without getting in the way of it. Even when she wanted nothing more than to get rid of Luca, she insisted on being by her side, and Nina wanted to stop fighting it. But then she came across Joachim, who also managed to survive the incarnation ceremony with his penchant for survival, and she came to yet another important understanding of her own character. Nina knew she might be thinking favorably of Luca now, but there could come a time when she would resent her again and restart the cycle of punishment all over. With Joachim, someone that was as weak as she was, at least she didn't have to think too much about living in his shadow because they were one and the same. Nina came to believe that their combined weakness would make them stronger than they were as individuals, and so she left her girls behind without even so much as a goodbye. She thought to herself that maybe she could become kinder and more comfortable with who she was with Joachim for support, and she wished to keep living until the day she found her girls again and could laugh with them sincerely. In a way, Nina redeemed herself in that moment because she understood her fatal flaw and decided to work on it, independent of any other person's influence. Sure, none of that makes up for abandoning her friends in their greatest time of need and looking out only for her survival, but by acknowledging her resentful nature to herself, she took the first step towards healing. Nina's admission of weakness and decision to elope with Joachim, a man who shared her sins and feelings, is more mature than anything she'd done up to that point, and for a long time we figure that was that. Luca and her girls had lasted an entire arc and had been rather meaningful side characters with a pretty natural story conclusion. That is, until they resurfaced in Falconia. Causality has a funny way of tying up every loose thread Miura leaves dangling across his story. During the Golden Age arc, it was Puck who became the unexpected connective tissue between the past, present, and future of the series. We first met him during Guts' time as the Black Swordsman, but he saved him from death when he'd been through his 100-man slaying night, and then again after the eclipse. Both instances were unintentional and completely unrelated to Puck himself. He happened to meet Judo a few years before he joined the Falcons and gave him a sizable supply of elf dust, which was then exhausted on healing Guts. He also gave Rickert a decent chunk of the same thing shortly before the eclipse, completely unaware of his relation to Judo, Guts, or any of the Falcons. Puck became an integral part of that arc, all things considered, and he wasn't even supposed to be a part of it. It's possible that Nina will end up doing something similar just when we least expect it. How will Nina return if she does? And what will be her redemption? Despite being scattered all across the globe geographically, most characters in Berserk are now flocking to one of two locations. Those who desire safety, salvation, and an easy life above all are moving towards Falconia, which they believe to be their only sanctuary in the world. Those who desire correction, order through free will, and the eradication of all evil influences, astral or otherwise, are gathering in the Kushan capital as of this moment. Given Nina's disposition and probable unawareness of Griffith's true nature, it's safe to say that if she managed to outlive her STD, she'd be headed for Falconia. Now, it's possible that she and Joachim are in the city already, they're just living in a district far away from Luca's. It makes sense for Nina to be headed to Falconia because it's where most of the surviving doctors of the West are likely to be. So, if she has managed to survive and make it to Griffith's capital, then there's a big chance that she'll end up crossing paths with her old friends. Berserk has made a point of tying up every character it's heavily invested in. Owen and Laban were side characters from the Golden Age that we never really saw having any use until Miura sprinkled them into the Conviction and Millennium Falcon arcs, making them indispensable to Griffith's dream. The hope in bringing Nina to Falconia must have been the same, but once she and the rest of the crew figure out that Griffith has kept their beloved Elaine locked up in his castle, they're bound to be stirred toward action. Luca might not be a prostitute anymore, but she is the manager of an inn in Falconia, and she keeps up with everyone and everything that goes on in the city. Her last involvement in its affairs saw her helping Rickard, Salat, and Daiba escape, and she'll be lucky if her name doesn't come up in the investigation regarding said escape. If Luca is indeed taken in on charges of treason, that could potentially ruin a plan she can put into place to rescue Casca. 4 women that look like handmaidens will be crucial to the plan, as you'll understand after watching another one of our videos on an obscure Berserk character, but if that ends up happening, then it would be sheer poetry having Nina step in to fill her role. When we last saw her, she wanted to live. She wanted to become sincere, and she wanted to become stronger, so that the next time she laughed with her girls, it would be genuine and devoid of jealousy or malice. Elaine and Luca were the primary targets of her resentment when she was still scared old Nina, and if Luca's hypothetical plan to rescue Elaine needs her to step out and let someone else take her place, Nina can right 2 wrongs at the same time. She's a relatively smart and crafty individual that can talk and seduce her way through the Falcon's castle right up until the moment she reaches Casca's prison. Since she isn't affiliated with Luca's group in Falconia, this will give her the anonymity she needs in case any of them can't execute the rescue plan. Could there be any better way to close her character arc than for her to die trying to save the one person she condemned the most, while gaining the respect of the one person she wanted to please more than anyone else? We know that this is a point of pure speculation, but like we mentioned with Puck earlier, Berserk has a tendency to tie up all of its loose ends as best as it can. And if Nina's story is anything, it's a loose end. The girl cut herself off from the only support system she'd ever known to grow as a person, and we'd like to think that that kind of character development deserves some on-screen recognition. I know, we said that Nina is the most hated Berserk character ever, but we think we've established that's only because most of us know damn well we would also sell out a comrade before having our nails pulled out with medieval pliers. No matter how evil or irredeemable a character feels at the beginning of their story, there's always room for growth in every person if they open their lives up to it. We think that Nina has already taken a few steps towards seeing the day where her laughs with Luca and the girls will be nothing but genuine, and who knows, maybe she'll save one of their lives while she's at it. Marvelous verdict! But as for this video, we're afraid that's all we got for you guys. Nina is one of the most controversial Berserk characters, but not without reason. Her story is as simple and straight as a ball of tangled yarn, and despite the hate she receives, it's worth keeping an eye out for because she's still number 1 on our unexpected character return list, right after the fortune teller from the Eclipse, that girl called Jill from the Lost Children chapter, the idea of evil, and Guts' father. Where is that guy anyway? Anyways, that's enough out of us, but what do you guys think? Will Nina return to Berserk, and if so, will she ever redeem herself? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more Berserk content. And never forget, keep on struggling, strugglers.